Now the question comes, can you sell your business? And if yes, then who will buy? And next question will be, how do I sell my startup? To answer all these questions, we requested Rishi to join us and share his views. And on this note, I welcome Rishi once again. If you have any questions from the audience, please please click on the raise your hand option, and then we will unmute you. You can ask a question. Over to you, Rishi. Thanks once again for joining us. Maybe we can start with your entrepreneur journey. How did that entrepreneur bug bit you, and then you built Konami?
So it's an interesting story, Varun, in the sense that I think when you talk about the entrepreneurship bug, I don't think there was one single moment that led me to it, but more of a series of events over time. So I think the first time I considered entrepreneurship was when I was at ISB. This was in 2013 and 14. So ISB, my peer network over there were a lot of budding entrepreneurs, some former entrepreneurs, who had a lot of interesting ideas, interesting experiences. And we had a very active entrepreneurship forum and, cell over there as well. But, the thing is that in 2013, most of the startups were emerging in the space of internet and e-commerce. And I did not have any prior experience in either of these spaces. So I felt that, before I take that leap, I should get some, relevant experience in those spaces. So immediately after my MBA, I worked in 2 e-commerce companies, one of them being Snapdeal, over a period of 2.5 years. And by 2016, I felt that, I had enough relevant experience, seen enough scale to finally take that plunge. So in 2016 is when we started Sports Unity Private Limited. So that's the name of our company. Konami is our flagship product. Mm-hmm. So our first product that we built was actually a sports social engagement platform, which was also called Sports Unity. And we pivoted twice, from a social platform to a sports quizzing platform, and eventually to a general knowledge quizzing platform. And that was finally our product, Konami, which, did fairly well and, got us to where we are today.
So you joined Snapdeal, you did MBA, and but how did you think that gaming can be the next big thing to enter into? Did you have any experience in gaming, or were you a gamer from since your childhood? How did gaming came as a sector to your mind?
So I would not call myself an avid gamer, but you see, in 2016, when we started Sports Unity, this was around the same time when Reliance Jio entered, the telecom market.
India's biggest startup, you mean, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what happened was that, in front of our eyes, we had seen the adoption of, smartphones and, with internet capability suddenly surge. Now, we knew that for us, the decision was not to enter gaming, but to enter real money gaming, right? And until 2016, real money gaming was a very niche market, primarily dominated by poker sites, rummy sites, and fantasy. Dream 11 was becoming big during that time. But with the arrival of Jio, real money gaming for the masses started picking up. And we detected that early.
Okay.
So we knew this was going to become big in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's actually been demonstrated. Real money gaming has seen a compounded growth of 35 to 40% for the last 3 years. It's a $300 million market right now, and it's expected to uh, grow to over $1 billion by 2025.
Mhm.
So it was, basically, I would say that Geo um,
Acted as a catalyst to.
acted as a catalyst for us to spot that trend.
So can we safely say that the first step, since our discussion is 7 steps to sell your startup, so can we safely say that the first step to sell your startup is to detect or envision the early opportunity in any domain? So of
Yeah.
course, business gets seeded from that idea only, right? So that's the very first step. Can we safely say that, or do you think there are more to it?
See, I think identifying an opportunity early on certainly gives you an advantage over, over followers. Having said that, what's equally important is the execution as well, because there are umpteen examples of second movers as well, who who actually grab the market share. But I think if you identify the opportunity early, it allows you to set the pace early as well. So it's an advantageous position. It gives you um, some bandwidth to make a few mistakes and not get punished for it. So I think yes, I think as an entrepreneur, you always have to keep your eyes and ears open and get a sense of what is happening around you and be able to convert that sense into a forecast.
So
So
the team plays a big role in any business. I'm sure in your case as well, your team would have played a very, very big role. Uh, I speak to many HR professionals. Their mailbox is full of emails from different founders that they want to hire X, they want to hire Y. What do you think as a startup founder? Did you see in your team what kind of people should work with you, because they can make or break your business at the very early stage, and you were part of Snapdeal at the initial days as well, right? So you were those talented team members probably Snapdeal had. So how did you identify the right talents to make your business?
I think when I evaluate any person to add to my team, the most important thing for me is the attitude, because um, I don't think it is that big of a challenge to find people who have the right technical skill set. You will be able to find that. That is not going to be a problem. Why attitude is important, especially in the context of a startup, is because you are going to see many, crests and troughs. You're going to see a lot of lows, and it's during those lows that you need to be able to power through. And you can't power through on your own as a founder. You need your team, and like in our case, our engineering, our design team, our customer support, everybody. You need them to be able to power through as well. Still work long hours. Um, you know, not complained about additional work, but rather own that product yourselves. So having the right attitude, I think, is more important than evaluating that skill set, because I believe skill set can be built over time. We actually, have, and I'm very proud of this, because we've actually hired a lot of freshers in our team. We're still a small team, 12 people, but Sportsunity has been the starting ground of the careers of half our team. And I've seen them grow, professionally in front of my eyes. And I think my decision, was vindicated, to get them, because they had the right attitude.
Mm-hmm. And how did you prepare for the fundraising? Now you had an idea, a wonderful team, a decent product. Definitely the next big question will be, how do we make the whole product? It requires money. And then you approach the investors. How did you prepare for that? I'm sure you would have reached out to many
Yeah.
investors, and
Yeah.
finally one
Yeah.
wrote the check. So how did that happen? What is your experience in raising money?
So, raising money is a very, very complicated process, and it it entails a lot of self-learning. But I think if you're talking about the key ingredients that make your raising money venture a success, is that as a founder, you need to have clarity of thought. And I think any investor is looking for clarity of thought, clarity of vision, where you want to be, in the next 5 years. So that's the human side of it. And in addition to that, there's obviously the business side, because you need to be very clear who your customers are, what is the addressable market size, what is the problem that you're trying to address, right? So, and it always helps if you have demonstrated some growth story, however small that may be. But if you can show a growth trajectory which validates the economic viability of your idea, right? I think that goes a long way. And I think that was our differentiator, between the first few attempts we did at raising money and the one with Nazara, was that we were able to show a sustainable growth over months. It was not very big, but it was sustainable. And at least that demonstrates a proof of concept in front of your investors.
And while building Konami, I'm sure you would have committed many mistakes. So I'm not talking about mistakes in the technology. I'm talking about mistakes in building the business. Do you want to highlight a couple of them? So of course, you are free to say no, but it will be really helpful for our audience to understand what not to do while building a startup.
So I think, as I said early on in our conversation, we had pivoted twice before we finalized on Konami as a proof of concept. Now, the reason for the pivot was because we came to a point of realization that we had not achieved product market fit, right? And that's a very, very difficult thing to accept, because everything that you do and the foundation of everything that you are building as a product is on the assumption that you have achieved product market fit. Mm-hmm. Now, why didn't we achieve product market fit? I think the first few times that didn't happen was because we hadn't done a thorough research, right? And see, that's a part of a learning process, and we could have obviously saved significant time if we not done that. But you need to be extremely sure that what you're building is solving a real problem or a real purpose. So certainly avoid that mistake. Mm-hmm. The second mistake that I would advise all entrepreneurs from being wary of is to not be nimble. So what I mean by that is, it is extremely important to achieve proof of concept of your idea. Keep that as your focus. Now, when you know that is your focus, you will be fast and rapid. Whatever you're building. So let's say I'm taking an example of a B2C product that you are trying to build for your market. If you want to demonstrate proof of concept quickly, try to build a minimum viable product, right? Don't go about building 10, 20 features. Mm-hmm. Concentrate on a few features that you're trying to build, right? And get self-conviction that what you're building is of value. Then add on to it.
So first is the perfect idea we should have. Second is the perfect team we should have. And third is probably what you said is build the minimum viable product and solve the real problem. So these three are the core things which we should keep in mind if we are building a startup for ultimate sale. Okay, so this leads to another question, Rishi. Many entrepreneurs, they break down. They are not able to keep their mind very much stable. Every day is a new day for them, and every evening may be a tough evening for them. How do you keep your calm? How do you remain calm and composed and still building? And I'm sure this is this is a difficult phase for every entrepreneur, but how do you keep that?
That's a very good question, Varun. I think, as an entrepreneur, especially when you have, a team, a small team, you become family, right? And you get this sense of responsibility that you have to look out for your team as well. Because if as an entrepreneur you break down, right, your team is looking to you for inspiration and for weathering the storm, right? So it's extremely critical to be calm, be composed, be objective. When things are going wrong, accept it, right? But try to be objective, try to set your feelings aside and just focus on moving forward. There are going to be challenges. As an entrepreneur, you have to accept it. You have to accept that you will probably see a difficult time every few months. And it just becomes a part of life. And accept it that, or rather, treat it as an opportunity first as growth. It's just going to make you a better person. So,
who's your inspiration? So I understand. So all of us read a lot about business leaders and watch different documentaries, movies. Who is your inspiration? So many times when I meet the startup founders, they say Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. So is this again common with you as well, or there's a different name?
Yeah, so I think, there are so many people that you can look up to and, for different traits, right? So I don't think I look up to one particular, founder per se, but for example, if you talk about, being a visionary, then I think Steve Jobs is right up there. If you talk about perseverance, then I think Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
If you hear his stories and if you read about him, he's seen some really tough times, right? Yeah. And multiple points at which his company would have almost run into bankruptcy.
Yes.
So and when you listen to Elon Musk talking, right, he says it very objectively and as a matter of fact that 90% of all automobile companies fail. In spite of that, he started Tesla. So he started that company very well aware of that risk, right? But he still went ahead with it, and he still persevered. So there are different things that you can look up to from different founders. When I talk about dedication and sincerity, then I look up. I don't have to look beyond my home. I just look up to my dad. So yeah, different lessons to learn from.
I'll come to that at the later part of the discussion. I think we're getting too much philosophical here. Let's go back to the business now.
Yeah,
Do you think accelerators and incubators play some role in startup growth? And did you ever think of approaching them?
Incubators and accelerators?
Yeah. Something like Y Combinator. Do you miss that in India, or do you think the accelerators in India are doing a right job?
I think there's some way to go for that. In terms of a thriving accelerator ecosystem, I don't think exists per se in India, because I mean we just have to look at the number of startups that India is producing every year. 90% of all startups fail. In fact, more than that. Yeah. And India is no exception to that rule. And I think accelerators are more important for young founders, right? Because when you raise money from a professional investment firm, your life changes, right? I feel that accelerators provide you somewhat of a protected environment where you are allowed to learn the basics of how to build a product or a service, how to build a minimum viable product, right? How How do you go about understanding the market size and evaluating the market? I feel accelerators provided a more protected and a more forgiving environment. So I think that is more critical, for young founders who try to start their businesses straight out of college.
And when you are reaching out to the investors, so would you be able to share some questions, like what kind of questions did they ask and how did you answer that? Were you prepared? Were you not prepared? This will actually help young entrepreneurs if they are reaching out to investors.
So I think the basic thing, that the core two things that you need to understand is know the market and know your own business inside out completely. Right? So knowing the market, as I said, as I've talked about earlier as well, is basically just knowing your customer, right? Who are your competitors? Those are the kind of questions that would be asked. Have any of your competitors raised any money, right? What kind of growth do you foresee yourself in the next 5 years? How much money do you want to raise, and how can you justify your money requirement? Where are you going to spend that money? Right. Mm-hmm. So those are external questions, external and internal, of course, regarding how you're going to spend your money, etc. But also knowing your own business metrics inside out. So, for example, this goes for B2B and for B2C. Basic questions, for example, what is your cost of acquisition for a customer? What do your retention metrics look like? What is the lifetime revenue that you're generating from each customer? How have these metrics trended over time? So you need to know your own numbers inside out.
But you were building the startup when there was no legacy in real time, real money gaming business, mm-hmm. right? So how did you convince your investors that, okay, this will be a new big thing? Because there was no legacy, there was no history to justify your business case. How did you did your projections? How did you find your right customers then? How did you penetrate the market?
So the good thing with us was that the time when we were raising money, Dream 11 was already an established brand, right? That gave confidence to our investors that at least there are a few big entities out there, right? So, okay, so what was already established was that in niche markets, there were big players in fantasy and in poker and rummy. The only challenge that we had to face was that we were trying to raise money for a mass product, right? And that was certainly a challenge, but I think what helped us was that we had demonstrated some sort of growth over 6 months, right? And we had a clear vision of, how this market is going to move. So I think that if you can demonstrate to your potential investors that you have clarity of vision and that you can sense what's going out there in the market, that goes a long way into your investors gaining confidence.
What kind of customers do you have? More of millennials, college students, or in 30s? What kind of customers do you have?
So 70% of our customers are in the range age group of 18 to 25, mm-hmm. Predominantly male. And if we talk about geography, then mostly tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Okay, tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Yeah.
Usually. Did you ever face rejection from your customers?
Oh yeah. Early on in our journey, a lot. And
but were you deeply hurt, or you found that as an opportunity?
I think the first few times you do take it a little personally, and over time you learn not to take it personally and just to take it as a learning. And if you sense a common pattern and a common theme of complaints from your customers, then I think you should be happy about it, because it gives you an area, an opportunity to actually improve your product and improve your business for your customers.
So we discuss first is the idea, second then we discuss the team, and then we discussed minimum viability of the product, which is solving real problem. I think the fourth, I think the mental stability and the state of mind of the entrepreneur is the most important thing here if they are building a company to sell. Of course, customers will reject big companies' product as well even today, and big companies also pivot to a new, and that's part of the journey. So it's not an easy thing. What was the role of your co-founder in building the product? Do you think a right partner in building a product is an essential, or a right investor is essential? Who is more important?
So I think having the right co-founder is very, very important. It's probably more important, I would say, because I have seen cases where there are co-founders who have the same skill set and who have the exact same way of thinking, right? But it's very, very important that your co-founder has complementary set of skills and is basically filling gaps which exist in yourself. So if I take my example, right, I have a more structured thought process, right, while my co-founder he thinks more out of the box, and I think that works perfect. That's a great combination, and I feel that I'm fortunate that way. So having the right co-founder who fills gaps that exist in you goes a long way into eventually building your product, scaling your product, and raising money if required.
And there is an old saying, when there are two people in one room at some point of time, they will start fighting. So how do you resolve conflict with your co-founder? I'm sure you don't think exactly the same direction every day. You will have definitely some conflict. And sometimes having conflict is also good, because then your end product is perfect. But how do you resolve that conflict?
See, I think what's important to realize is that as co-founders, you need to accept that there are going to be times when you're going to have different thoughts, right? It's important not to take the opposing view personally, right? Take it, be objective, right? And be open to the idea that you can be wrong, right? And I think me and my co-founder both, share those same values over there. So sometimes, we have differences. Sometimes what I have said, we have gone through with that. Sometimes what he has said, we've gone through with that. So I think what has helped us both is not to take criticism of the other's ideas personally, right? And just be open to the belief that you can be wrong.
Rishi, would you be okay if we pick up question from the audience?
Yeah, sure, my pleasure.
Okay, Karthike has a question. Manan, can you please unmute Karthike and the question can be asked?
Yes.
Karthike, welcome. Please ask your question.
Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. So, first of all, the thing is that I am still in college, but having a certain idea, and I have found a person as well. Now, something that conflicts my mind is whether or not, if I want to go ahead with my startup, it is based on a tech. It's based on a tech startup, more on the side of providing parking. Like, you can reserve parking lots, and a different scenario altogether. Yet, I sometimes feel like maybe the age could be an issue for me. When you have a scenario, like I have met a lot of people, I have been seeing a lot of videos and asking, they say that, like you just said, having a first team is very important. Now, upon maturity, it's difficult for me to realize as well whether or not the person I have on my side is mature or not. So how is it right for you to decide at at such an early age you can get the right person with you and that you make the right decisions throughout your journey?
Okay. So let me just, make sure that I've understood your question perfectly before I answer it. So your question is whether how do you detect whether your co-founder is your ideal co-founder, right? Whether he has the right maturity or the right set of skill sets to complement you. Is that your question?
Yeah. And do you mind if I add on to this? Just because it's based on the age, that is like my major crux of the question as such. Do you mind if I just add on?
The question is age just a number or is age actually matters?
Yeah, that because I have had instances where people tell me that you should have a job experience before you start your own startup, and you should have like a firm experience within that sort of a area, which is the tech market, the tech area. Now, I per se have no technical knowledge, but the partner I have, he is someone who's learning. But since we have common thoughts and like you said, having a similar, having complementary thoughts, but having a similar, passion to do something, I, from my point of view, I have seen it. But how sure do you get, in those lines too, that at this age you can get the right person, and that later on I don't actually need job experience to go by what I want to do.
Okay, so I think I understand, your situation over here, and basically, see, I think what's important to realize is that as an entrepreneur, you will have sacrifices to make, right? Now, I'll tell you why I'm saying that. If you are going to be making those sacrifices, right, you owe it to yourself to reduce the risk element as much as possible, right? Now, as an entrepreneur, there are going to be multiple um, avenues of risk exposure. So, for example, are you building the right product? Um, is your can you extract economic value from your customers, and do you have the right team? So yes, age is just a number. There are enough examples of people having maturity beyond their age. But see, I think that is a question for you to kind of answer, in the sense that if you feel that your co-founder lacks maturity or lacks the certain temperament is equally important, right? Then you should be aware of that, and you should, if you still go ahead with it, you should be aware of the risks that you're taking. Now, everybody's risk appetite is also different, right? Personally, whenever I take a risk, I take a calculated risk, right? So if I have to ever start a business in a particular industry, my preferred way would be to get some exposure of that industry first, some reality check of that industry, but that needn't be the same for everybody else, right? So it depends on what is your risk appetite in this case. And if you say that you have certain question marks over your team and let's say over your co-founder, then you need to ask yourself whether that falls within your accepted levels of risk. And trust me, it is a risk. If you don't have the right co-founder, things can go wrong, right? So yeah, that's all I would say. I would say that you need to evaluate your risk appetite in this particular scenario.
Thank you so much.
Rishi, What is more difficult phase, pre-funding phase or post-funding phase? So once you don't have funds, is this the difficult stage, or once you have funds, the difficult stage?
Both have their own difficulty. Both, I would call them challenges rather, right? But I think pre-funding. See, the difficulty with pre-funding is that the financial resources that you have are constrained, right? So you have certain, let's say you have certain ideas that you want to execute, and you need a team to build that idea. Then that becomes a challenge, and you have to you're forced to become a master of focusing your resources and focusing on the important things. The challenge with post funding is that it forces you to become more disciplined. It's in a good way, it's a good thing in a way, because basically what happens in a post funding scenario is that you have raised money from institutional investors or any other entity based on certain projections that you've made, based on certain forecasts of how your business is going to pan out, right? That is the basis of your fundraise, right? So once you have raised that money, it's your responsibility to your shareholders, that you, to the best of your abilities, you meet those projections.
You deliver what you have committed.
Exactly, right. So it forces you to become more disciplined, I would say. I think in pre-funding, you are not so used to the fact of others asking you questions. As an investor has every right to ask you questions, right? Yeah. But that is something that one needs to get accustomed to. Weekly reviews, quarterly reviews, and just making sure your stakeholders are aware. It's your responsibility to make sure that they're aware of the progress that's happening in your company. So I would say that's how life changes. Post funding.
Post funding.
Yeah.
So I think post funding is what I gather is the more difficult in comparison to pre funding.
I think I'm happier post funding. I'm in a better place, post funding. Okay. And that is because, see, what happens is that, once you've raised money, at least what you have, so that validation certainly gives you that added drive.
Great.
Yeah.
We have another question from the audience. Abhay has typed in a question in the Q&A box, so I'm unmuting Abhay. Abhay, you can ask your question now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, so I was just curious. I was wondering what advice, Rishi, would you have for professionals who've been working in the industry for a while and looking to transition to becoming an entrepreneur? Like any sort of common pitfalls you see or any behaviors you would identify as, hey, this is not necessarily the right setup before you make that transition?
Okay. So I think what's important is if you're going to make that switch between a professional life and entrepreneurship, like entrepreneur's life, you need to ask yourselves what are the reasons that you want to make that switch, right? Are those reasons strong enough for you? So your reasons could be that I want to I have a passion to build something from scratch, right? I have a burning desire for it. I want to be my own boss, or so you need to answer those questions for yourself, and you need to. So I think one of the things that a lot of professionals face as a problem is that they are not aware of how life would change once they switch, to an entrepreneur. So as a professional, talk to as many entrepreneurs as you can, right? Get an understanding of how their life is, their day-to-day life is, right? And if you feel that you have the appetite for that, then definitely go ahead. But limit the surprises that you would have as much as possible, right? The more aware and the more prepared you are for it, and as long as you have the right reasons for it, be aware of your reasons. I think it puts you in a good position to make that switch.
Does that answer your question, Abhay?
Yeah, I think so. That was good. I think maybe is there maybe if I can add on something there. It's really when you say be aware of the reasons. Is there a way to, apart from talking to other entrepreneurs you may or may not know, are there any other sort of resources you would recommend for someone to clarify those reasons before even taking it any further?
So when I said talking to entrepreneurs, what I meant was that when you talk to an entrepreneur, you'll become more aware of how their day-to-day life is and what kind of challenges they make. They will not help you answer the reasons for you to become an entrepreneur. They will only help you be aware of the challenges. The reasons you need to ask yourself, right? Why you want to become an entrepreneur. And as I said, I just gave a few examples, right? That if let's say, you're working in a particular industry, right? And you see that there's some part of that industry which has a very, very fundamental problem, and you have a burning desire to solve that problem, right? Then that's a reason for you, right? Or if you want, to do something, you want a change in the way, your life has been so far in terms of, a regular 9-to-5 job, and you want to seek out more adventure. It could be anything. See, your reasons for becoming an entrepreneur, could be multifold. But I'm saying your reasons you need to ask yourself, right? And the reality of an entrepreneur's life, those questions you will be able to answer once you talk to entrepreneurs. You need, see that, as I said earlier also, you owe it to yourself to reduce the risks and to reduce the surprises in your life if you're going to take that step.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Rishi.
Rishi, what role valuation plays in building a startup and selling it eventually?
So I think it's extremely critical. When you go about, raising money, then you need to make sure that, valuations that you set about for your own product are realistic and are justified, right? And also friendly to your investor, in the sense that, see, an investor is going to put in money in your company also with a certain vision, right? So if he puts in money, does he see the value of that company growing in the next 5 years, right? So valuation is extremely critical from that point of view, because if you're going to create value for your investors, you need to be able to multiply that value for them, right? So, and while on the same side, you don't want to undersell yourself as well, right?
Can we say that this is another key step to build your startup towards sale? The key step is to actually arrive at a fair valuation, aesthetically, perception-wise. So it should not be like too much ballooned or too much small. Like, do you think right valuation is also a key to successfully sell off a startup?
So it is, and it also depends on the stage at which you're selling equity in your startup. Whether you're exiting all the way through or you're just diluting. If you're selling out early, then you will not get that big valuation. I mean, that's just a fact, right? So it depends on what are your reasons for diluting or for exiting at that stage, right? And if let's say you are diluting your equity in a startup, which means that you are still going to be a fundamental part of the operations of that startup. You're still going to be the founder who is running things, right? Then it's your responsibility to increase the value of your startup as well, right? So if you remain adamant on a certain inflated value, right, you are probably going to make life difficult for yourself, because you won't probably be able to deliver on multiplying that value for your shareholders.
Right
So
valuation.
be fair and be just. And yes, of course, don't undersell yourself as well.
Yeah.
Right. So we have another question from the audience. Satish has raised his hand. Satish, I'm unmuting you, and you can ask your question now.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Satish Khupchandani. I wanted to know that if there is a planning of say 4 or 5 rounds of raising funds, then what is the stake to be diluted at each round, especially in the beginning, because the investors would want a bigger stake. So how could that be planned if I'm having 4 rounds of funding lined up, like over a period of next 5 years or 7 years?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just give a disclaimer before answering this question. I haven't personally gone through so many rounds of funding, right? But I can say certain principles that would apply nevertheless. See, whenever an investor invests in your startup, whatever the phase may be, the investor needs to be assured that the founder has enough motivation and enough incentive to be able to multiply the value of that startup. So, for example, let's say in the first round of funding itself, right, the investor acquires so much stake and dilutes the founder so much that the founder is hardly left with anything. Then what is the motivation left for the founder to really multiply that value, right? So I think even from an investor's point of view, an investor also won't, really push too hard on, trying to dilute the founder too much, because he's aware of that reality, right? So the answer to your question is, I don't think I can answer the question in numbers per se, but more in terms of the principle that the founder, it's extremely important for the investor, for the founder to continue to remain motivated at the end of that fundraise.
Maybe I can add to what Rishi said. I have raised multiple rounds for different startups, so I can actually probably help with the numbers as well. So Satish, what we see as an advisory firm for any fundraising discussion, that at what stage the promoter, original founder of the company will fall below 50% and below 26%. So these are the two critical numbers which we look at. So if the founder stake is falling below 26%, say at Series A or Series B, we avoid those kind of investment discussions, because then mostly the company is owned by the investors and the founders don't have a say in the company legally. So there are three controlling stages of a company, which is 74%, 75%, then 50%, and 26%. So you can actually read that in company law. But the moment the control gets loosened for the founders at the initial stage, the later stage investors lose faith in the company, mostly. Unless the company is too big that the founder is still part of the business, where 10, 12, 15% of the stake it doesn't matter. So the company has to be very big in that stage, maybe Series E, Series F kind of round, but initial stages should not fall below 50% for sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Rishi, we are about to close this session, but our seventh point is still pending. My seventh point will be, how do we find buyers? So we have built the product now, we have hired a right team. identified the right customers, everything we have done, and also found the right co-founder and arrived at a right valuation.
Valuation as
How,
well, yeah.
how do I find buyers?
So that's a really, really good question, Varun. And the interesting thing about that is, I think everybody goes through their own different process of finding the buyer. But I think what is key to be able to successfully find a buyer is that as a founder, you might get too caught up in building your product, right? That you don't leave time to be to network within your industry, right? And to talk to potential investors, right? Always keep talking and be in touch uh, with people in your industry, and with investors. Share updates constantly with them. See, probably 2 out of 10 people that you talk to would show interest in what you're doing, but your doors will open from one of those opportunities. And that's how it happened for us also, by the way. So it's important that while you're building your product and your business, always talk to people in your industries. Sometimes it's a common connect, right, who will open that investment opportunity for you. That's the best you can do.
So stay in touch with the people around you.
Stay in touch with with people within your industry. It needn't be in your industry. It could just be in the startup ecosystem in general, right? But building that solid network goes a long way, not just in finding a buyer, but sometimes in building your team, forging partnerships, and just opening opportunities in general.
Interesting.
Okay, Rishi, we have another question from the audience. And since we have reached the end of the scheduled time, can we take one last question before we wrap up?
Yeah, certainly.
So Tanuj, I am unmuting you and you can ask your question now. Tanuj, you may ask your question, yeah.
Hi, Rishi.
Hi, Tanuj.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know more than just the startup itself. Who do you credit for your success? I mean, who do you at the end of the day, who do you talk to just like unwind sort of thing?
So, okay, I want to make sure that I understood that question properly. So, is your question who I credit the success to, or
to every successful man there's a woman, but who is behind your success, a man or a woman?
Okay, I think
this is what your question is, right, Tanuj?
I hope we've understood that perfectly.
Yeah, I mean it's twofold, that we focus a lot on what happens in the office, but outside the office.
So I'm sure Tanuj, you're not from Rishi's family and you wanted to have Rishi say a name, right? So it's a simple question, right?
No, I think see, as I covered earlier as well, an entrepreneur's journey is tough, right? So they require support themselves, because for their startup team, they are the support that the team members need. So for the entrepreneur themselves, their friends and family go a long way into that support that the entrepreneur needs. Because see, it's important to have some way to unwind and to sometimes forget about your work. And it's very, very important to keep a stable mind. So yeah, in my case, my my wife and my friends and my parents, my sister, all of them contribute in their own way, and I think they've all been very, very supportive in sometimes listening to my rants. So yeah, I think that goes for not just for me. I think that goes for most people in any way, professional way of life.
Okay, so before we close for the session, Rishi, one last question from my side. If you are not working on Konami, then what you're working on?
What would I be working on, or?
No. I mean, how do you spend your free time? What do you do in your free time now?
Oh, okay. So I'm very passionate about football. So in college, I used to play a lot of football, and even now, I play on my PlayStation. I think that's one of the most effective ways for me to unwind.
I think there's no better pastime than playing FIFA.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I was on it today morning, as a matter of fact.
Do you also read books? I see a lot of books behind your screen. So do you also read books?
Yes, I do, but not as much as I would like. I would like to read more, certainly. But I was mentioning, stories about, Zuckerberg and, Steve Jobs and Musk, and most of them I have, stories that I've read in these books.
One book or one movie or one documentary which you would like to recommend to our audience?
Yeah, so the Facebook Effect is a good book to read. It talks about Mark Zuckerberg's entire journey, and what is good about that book is that all of us know Facebook, from the time when it became really, really big, and very few of us actually know the challenges that he had to go through and the number of times that company almost closed. So that gives very, very good insight into the journey of most startups and almost any startup these days.
Wonderful, Rishi. So that calls the end of our session. Thank you so much for taking time out on Saturday morning, and thank you everyone who attended this session. Thanks for your participation. We look forward to hosting you again, and we look forward to seeing our participants again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Varun. It's been an absolute pleasure.